Government has published the National State Enterprises Bill. Now, this aims to reorganize the parastatals by creating a holding company which will essentially oversee them and enable private equity investment. Governance expert Dr. Sam Koma joins us for more. Dr. Koma, good evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Wena, for the opportunity.
So let's start with, just at the looking at the bill overall. What do you make of it at the onset? Because there's been those that are saying that, well, a lot of question marks around it. But generally, from a governance perspective, are we heading in the right direction?
Yes, thanks, Gwena. So what we know is that if the National State Enterprises Bill is enacted into law, it's likely to fundamentally alter how state-owned enterprises are run in the country. In the immediate, we are likely to see the phasing out of the Department of Public Enterprises. And also, secondly, we are likely to see about 5 state-owned enterprises that currently fall under the auspices of the Department of Public Enterprises, that is Eskom, Transnet, Alesco, Denel, and South African Airways, being transferred into a holding company that is going to be named a state management state-owned company limited. So it is going to be a holding company that will serve as a parent company. Under that parent company will be these state-owned enterprises I've mentioned that will serve as subsidiaries. Okay, so falling within the holding company. The government, the state will remain the sole shareholder of the holding company and the rest of the subsidiaries. In this instance, it means that the President of the Republic of South Africa will designate any of the cabinet ministers to oversee or to serve as a shareholder or represent the shareholder in terms of the setting up of the holding company as well as the subsidiaries. So the holding company will have its own board that will be constituted by the government, as I said, through the president designating a cabinet minister to action that part. It will also have its own CEO. So that is the major implication that will arise once the National State Enterprises Bill is enacted into law. So what is an area that needs to be strengthened, because we now know that the bill is subject to public comment and also consultative process, is the issue of the manner in which the boards will be composed. You remember the issue that has always been flagged is the issue of the people who are appointed in these boards seem to lack what it takes, the expertise, the experience to oversee the running of the affairs of these boards. So that is the area that needs to be beefed up as part of looking at the public comment that will be coming from a whole range of stakeholders and also us as ordinary members of the public. So what needs to happen is that we need to see a process similar to how the Judicial Service Commission interviews and make recommendation for appointment of the judges. If we have such a process incorporated in the bill, we are likely to see fundamental change in how the boards will be constituted, because we'll know that the process was transparent and publicly driven, but we know that the individuals that will be appointed meet the criteria and also are fit and proper to serve in these boards. So that is one area that needs to be looked into.
Before you go a little bit further, Dr. Koma, let's just take a few steps back. You mentioned that this will effectively replace the Public Enterprises Ministry, as it were. And not too many will miss the ministry, considering how the state-owned enterprises have been performing. But is this not just a change in name, in that you still have the ministry that was in charge of this, and now you're talking about the president being the sole representative, but the board and the executive being the most important, which again depending on the process, politics, lack of a better phrasing, will still come into play in selecting who's in charge, which one can argue that it still opens up those same problems that we've had with public enterprises.
You're right, Kwena. So you remember these state-owned enterprises that I've listed, Eskom, Transnet, Denel, South African Airways, they are all implicated in the final report of the Zondo Commission. And part of the finding of the Commission relates to this process of how these boards were constituted. The evidence is there. We know factually that this is what transpired. And remember, the Zondo Commission also arrived at the conclusion that the cadre deployment policy as practiced by the governing party is unlawful and unconstitutional. We know that there's not been a judicial review to set aside this finding arising from the Zondo Commission. So, hence we are saying, for us to insulate these boards from political influence, let's have a transparent process similar to how the Judicial Service Commission conducts its business in terms of looking at the selection, the interviewing, and also the recommendation of appointment of the judges. That's the area that needs to go into the bill, because we will know that we will not go back to the days of state capture and also the whole issue of political influence in the appointment of these board members. You remember also Eskom, in the last 3 years, has had 2 boards. One, it was dissolved. And at the core of that was the issue of the people who composed that previous board seem not to have the technical acumen, the expertise, the experience that relates to the energy sector. We now have a new board. Transnet recently also had a new board. Denel, we know that till this day, commercially, is facing viability challenges. And also, if you look at Transnet, the same. In the last couple of weeks, it posted a financial loss of about 5.7 billion rand. So, hence we are saying a safe bet is to incorporate this process that is similar to the Judicial Service Commission going into the bill.
So effectively, policy and regulatory issues would be very important in whether this bill succeeds or not. This new direction that we're likely going to take after the 2024 elections is going to, whether it will succeed or not.
Yes, so Kwena, you're right. So the state will still assume the regulatory role, and the policy role provides direction around that. But the positive coming out of the bill is this requirement inserted in the bill that will now require state-owned companies to ensure long-term commercial sustainability. Remember, the challenge has been around these state-owned enterprises failing to operate on commercial principles. That is, break even, make profit, attract private investment, but very important, rely less on government bailouts or guarantees to stay afloat. So that will go a long way if the bill is enacted into law to create that commercial space for the state-owned enterprises to go into the market, attract domestic and foreign direct investment, but also ensure that they operate profitably and also break even and also deal with other crucial facets of their business.
So, Dr. Koma, would it not make sense then if, you said earlier on that the president will act as the sole representative, right? Would it not have made sense if the Minister of Finance is the one who's the sole representative?
Yes, you're right, Kwena. So in the bill, there are 2 provisions that the president may exercise this role or designate a cabinet minister. So the bill is silent. Who will then be this minister? Because we now know for a fact that the Ministry for Public Enterprises will now cease to exist if the bill gets enacted into law. So it will be interesting, you're quite right, Kwena, whether the ultimately in the bill will have a clear provision that the Minister of Finance will now be the one who oversees the process of the constituting of these boards in terms of serving as a representative of the shareholder. But remember, these are state-owned companies. At the end of the day, the state will still have a stake and also provide a strategic direction on how they're supposed to operate and fulfill the crucial strategic objectives of the state.
And another key factor here, Dr. Koma, is accountability. In terms of who then holds the board, the exec, the SOEs accountable. Does it come down to Parliament?
Yes. So we'll still have the same accountability mechanism. All these boards, their chairpersons and the members of the boards will still account to Parliament through a portfolio committee, of course, of Parliament that will be designated to deal with issues of oversight and also scrutiny of the role and also the functioning of these boards. So ultimately, Parliament will still be vested with the responsibility to oversee the proper operational performance of these state-owned companies that will fall within the holding company as subsidiaries, but also the designated minister will still also play a crucial role in terms of ensuring that there is proper accountability mechanisms that are put in place.
And does this not also shut out the possibility of minority shareholding? Or does that also open up a lot of, hands within the pie?
Yeah, so we are likely to see what currently we have with the South African Airways. Remember the Takatso deal?
Yes.
We have a strategic equity partner that has been given shareholding in the running of the South African Airways. And that's the point I raised earlier, that the bill inserts that requirement of long-term commercial sustainability, that they have to go out into the market, attract this private investment, but the state will still remain the sole majority shareholder at the end of the day.
So I mean, you spoke earlier on about just the issue of the shake-up, and one of the big issues being state capture. Do you feel that this, if it's done right, will we be able to deal with issues like that, to eliminate issues like state capture?
Yes, but that is not sufficient.
Yeah.
Gwena, that is not sufficient.
Yes.
The other process that needs to kick in and be actioned immediately is what is contained in the final report of the Zondo Commission as a recommendation to set up a public procurement agency that is going to oversee public procurement across the state institutions. It will be an agency that is constituted by professionals in the domain of supply chain management. They will be properly regulated, vetted, belong to a professional body, and also the agency will operate more like the competition commission. Remember, it has its own units, one on litigation, inspections, investigations. So if we can see the implementation of this recommendation, plus what is contained in the National State Enterprises Bill, then we may be assured that we are likely not to witness again the days of state capture in the running of our state-owned companies and enterprises.
We continue our conversation with governance expert Dr. Sam Koma. Dr. Koma, just picking up on where we were, and I want us to look at just the positives then of this bill. You know, as you did say that some of this will depend on who is appointed to the board and the executive. But what other positives are likely to come out of this? And again, I repeat, if it is done correctly.
Yes, so there is a talk, Gwena, around the merging and consolidation of, remember, we've got about 750 plus state-owned enterprises. So this particular process will then finally culminate into the rationalization of the number of state-owned enterprises we have in the country. We may have a lean and mean number, very sizable, because as we know, the current size of the the state-owned enterprises seems not to be adding any value in the running of the economy. You can see that majority of them, they still rely on government bailouts to stay afloat. There are also challenges around acquisition of talent in the form of the CEOs and also other key personnel that are supposed to be part of these state-owned enterprises. So this is what we are likely to see going forward, the process of merging, consolidation of this huge number of state-owned enterprises that we have. So that's the positive that we are likely to see if this process is done correctly. I agree with you. And also if there are proper checks and balances put in place, and also we have a fair, transparent process that allows talented individuals across the board to be given an opportunity to be considered for appointment to serve in the boards of our state-owned companies or enterprises.
And the big question, Dr. Koma, has always been with the SOEs at this point that, as you mentioned, talented individuals, politics aside, do you feel that we have those talented individuals that are capable of taking these SOEs to greater heights where they belong? And we know that if done right, these SOEs can really do well.
Yes, Gwena, thanks for that. So the labor market in South Africa is abundant with this pool of professional talent in the form of chartered accountants, financial managers. We also have a caliber of chief executive officers who can come on board, chief finance officers who can also come on board, and a whole range of other technical skills, your engineering skills. If you take Eskom as a classic example, you go to Transnet, you can also have this kind of technical expertise that is brought into the space. So what we need to see also is the forging of collaborations between these state-owned enterprises and professional bodies, because this talent is resident in most of our professional bodies, your SAICA, the Engineering Council of South Africa, for example, and a whole range of other professional bodies that are there, housing this expertise that can be sourced through headhunting, for example, and also other mechanisms to come into the space so that we are able, Gwena, in the long run, to have fully functional, competitive, efficient, and effective state-owned companies.
There has been also another proposal, Dr. Koma, that, maybe what if this SOEs, that entities will then fall under all the relevant departments? Will that alleviate a little bit of pressure in just making sure that there is direct accountability?
Yes, Gwena. Yes. So remember, this proposition preceded what we now have in the bill. Because the argument has always been, you have Eskom housed in Public Enterprises Department, yet you have Department of Energy. You also have Transnet housed in Public Enterprises Department, yet you have the Department of Transport. Hence, there was that resolution, if you look at the resolution of the ANC NASREC conference held last year, December, that take state-owned enterprises to their line departments. So they were trying to address this particular anomaly that we have in the system. But now the bill addresses this issue. It means you now have to consider this bill in its current form and also look at how best to perfect certain areas in the bill that can best serve the issues that have been raised by different role players, labor, business. I remember they also raised this kind of issues. Yeah.
Is there any risk, Dr. Koma, of this bill becoming a white elephant, a great idea that never actually really materializes?
Yes, the only concern is that because it's a bill, it's now currently subject to public comment, we know that it will only be finalized by Parliament. That will be coming after the conclusion of the 2024 national elections. So that new Parliament will be seized with this bill, and we can only hope that that Parliament at that stage will proceed to finalize and also adopt the bill, and also if they have to amend or bring certain aspects to the bill, they can also do that. But finally, Parliament can adopt the bill, and also it gets enacted, and finally it becomes a law. So that's the only hope we can have here.
And also that can be, Dr. Koma, a lengthy process, right?
Yes. Hence, as I said, the timelines are very clear. This bill, in its current form, it won't be finalized anytime soon. That is before end of this year. It's not possible. We can only anticipate that after the national elections to be held in 2024, that parliament that is going to be elected will be the one that will consider finalizing. We hope by end of 2024 we'll have this bill enacted into law, as opposed to prolonging the finalization of the bill, get into 2025. Then there are also other issues that come into play. That would be very unfortunate, because the state of our state-owned companies, you can see, is very dire. As I mentioned earlier, Denel is struggling. Eskom, you can see, they're also sitting on 480 billion debt, struggling also financially and also operationally. South African Airways, you can see they're still struggling with the deal with Takatso. There are also other endemic governance challenges facing the state-owned enterprises. That needs to be immediately sorted out so that we are able to have functional, operational state-owned enterprises.
Dr. Koma, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for taking time to speak to us. I appreciate your time and your insight. That is governance expert, Dr. Sam Koma, just talking to us there.